The morning sun poured through the narrow blinds of the college dorm room, casting stripes across the messy floor. Emma Collins's side of the room was eerily quiet, her bed neatly made, a stark contrast to her usual chaotic pile of notebooks and clothes. Sophie Turner, her roommate, sat cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through her phone, barely noticing the light creeping into the room. "Emma?" Sophie called softly, her voice trembling slightly. Silence. At first, she thought Emma might be late for class, but as the hours passed, a gnawing sense of unease settled in. Sophie peeked into the bathroom, empty. She checked the kitchen, no sign of her roommate. Even Emma's coffee mug, half full and still warm, sat abandoned on the desk. By noon, worry had turned into alarm. Sophie's fingers trembled as she dialed Rachel Evans, Emma's closest friend. "Hey, it's Sophie. Have you seen Emma today?" There was a pause on the other end. Rachel's voice, usually bright and cheerful, carried a note of concern. "No. I texted her this morning, but she didn't reply." "That's not like her." Sophie swallowed. "Her stuff, it's all here. Like she just vanished." Rachel's intake of breath was audible. "I'll come over. We should, maybe call the campus security?" Sophie nodded, even though Rachel couldn't see her. "Yeah, that might be a good idea." Within 30 minutes, Rachel arrived, carrying her backpack like a shield. She immediately started scanning Emma's side of the room, picking up a notebook and flipping through it. "Nothing, just class notes, and her journal," she muttered, frowning. Sophie hesitated. "I didn't touch her journal. I didn't know she was missing." Rachel's eyes softened for a moment, but the worry didn't leave her face. "I know. We need to figure out where she could have gone. Did she mention anything yesterday? Any plans?" Sophie shook her head, biting her lip. "No. We studied together last night, she seemed fine. We were laughing over some stupid video." The two of them stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the faint hum of the dorm's ventilation system. Finally, Rachel spoke, her voice firm. "I'm calling campus security. If she's gone, they need to know." Minutes later, a young campus officer, clipboard in hand, knocked on the door. "Morning, ladies. Rachel Evans?" "Yes," Rachel replied, stepping forward. "My friend. Emma Collins, she's missing. She hasn't shown up for classes." The officer glanced at Sophie, who fidgeted. "When did you last see her?" "Last night," Sophie admitted. "We were in the room, watching videos, then I fell asleep." The officer nodded and jotted something down. "We'll start checking cameras and dorm records." "Did you notice anything unusual?" Sophie shook her head. "No, well, she left her wallet here. Her phone, her keys, everything. She didn't take anything with her." Rachel gripped Sophie's shoulder. "Don't worry. We'll find her. Someone must have seen something." But as the officer left, the weight of uncertainty lingered. The quiet dorm room suddenly felt colder, emptier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. And for Sophie Turner, the silence wasn't comforting, it was suffocating. By mid-afternoon, the dorm hallway was buzzing with whispers. Students glanced at Sophie with curious, uneasy eyes as she sat on her bed, hugging her knees. Campus security had checked the cameras, questioned a few students, and nothing concrete had come up. But Sophie could feel the invisible gaze of suspicion settling on her like a heavy blanket. Detective Mark Reynolds stepped off the elevator, tall and deliberate, his eyes scanning the dorm like a predator assessing its territory. He carried a leather case and a notebook, the tools of his trade. Beside him, Officer Lisa Chen trailed, tablet in hand, ready to record every detail. "Sophie Turner?" Reynolds asked, his voice firm but not hostile. "Yes," Sophie replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Detective Reynolds. This is Officer Chen. We're investigating the disappearance of your roommate, Emma Collins." He glanced at the room, noting the neatness of Emma's bed and the scattered remnants of her daily life. "We'll need to ask you a few questions." Sophie nodded, trying to steady herself. I'll help." Reynolds took a seat across from her, hands folded. Where were you last night? Sophie's eyes flickered toward the empty bed beside her. We were in the room together, watching videos. I fell asleep around midnight. And Emma? Reynolds pressed. She was awake when I went to sleep. I didn't hear her leave. Reynolds scribbled notes, then looked up. Any recent conflicts? Arguments? Anything unusual about your roommate? Sophie hesitated. She remembered the small disagreements over noise, the trivial annoyances, but nothing serious. No, she was normal. Happy, I guess. Officer Chen stepped forward. Sophie, you know that statistically, roommates are often the first suspects in cases like this. The words hit Sophie like a punch. She swallowed, blinking rapidly. I didn't. Reynolds held up a hand, signaling her to stay calm. I'm not accusing you. But we have to consider every possibility. Did Emma have any visitors last night? No, not that I saw, Sophie whispered. Detective Reynolds leaned back, studying her. And her phone, keys, wallet, all here? Yes. Everything. Sophie's voice quivered. I don't understand. She wouldn't just leave. Reynolds nodded, jotting something down. We'll check with your friends. Your side of the story is important, but right now, we have to look at all angles. You understand? Sophie nodded numbly, the weight of suspicion pressing harder. After the detectives left, whispers in the hallway grew louder. Rumors started to circulate, did you hear? Sophie's the quiet one, maybe she knows more than she's saying. Rachel tried to reassure her. People are just scared. You didn't do anything, Sophie. We'll find her. Sophie forced a smile but couldn't shake the feeling that the walls of the dorm were closing in. Every creak of the floorboards, every muffled laugh down the hall felt like a reminder of the eyes watching her, judging her. She sank onto her bed, staring at the ceiling. If only Emma would come back. But deep down, Sophie knew that this was just the beginning. And somehow, she sensed, the truth about Emma's disappearance was more complicated, and darker, than anyone could imagine. The dorm room felt emptier than ever. Emma's absence left a hollow echo in the air, a silence that pressed against Sophie and Rachel from every corner. Rachel sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through Emma's scattered belongings. Her eyes darted from notebooks to her laptop, scanning for any hint of her friend's plans or secrets. She wouldn't just vanish, Rachel muttered, flipping through Emma's journal. She stopped at a page where neat handwriting gave way to frantic scribbles. Sophie, look at this. Sophie leaned over, squinting. The words were mostly mundane, class notes, reflections on articles, but some lines were odd. The shadows move faster than the city notices, sometimes the quiet ones watch too closely. What does that mean? Sophie whispered, shivering. Rachel shook her head. I don't know, but it sounds like she was onto something. Meanwhile, Detective Reynolds and Officer Chen combed through the dorm surveillance footage. They noticed Emma leaving the building around 11:45 p.m., alone. No one else was on the footage near her that night. Yet something about her expression caught Reynolds' eye, tense, almost frightened. Back in the room, Rachel opened Emma's laptop. Her eyes widened. A series of recent emails to a journalism forum detailed unusual disappearances across the country. Emma had been researching them, notes, dates, places. One subject line read, patterns no one else sees. Sophie leaned closer, heart hammering. She was investigating? Yes, Rachel whispered. Maybe that's why she disappeared. Maybe someone didn't want her digging around. Detective Reynolds had similar thoughts. Comparing dorm camera timestamps with the nationwide reports Emma had logged, he started to see a troubling pattern. Locations of the disappearances, all small college towns, often with a similar profile, young women, quiet roommates, strange last sightings. He scribbled notes furiously. Could be a copycat. Or a single offender moving across states. He looked at the blank walls of the dorm room, then at Sophie, who fidgeted nervously. It's early, but your roommate's research could be relevant. Any idea if she mentioned anyone suspicious? Sophie shook her head, though an uneasy feeling curled in her stomach. Something about the way Emma had been so meticulous, so secretive, suggested she had been afraid of someone close, maybe someone she knew. Hours passed. The quiet room became a shrine of clues, notes, photos, emails, journals, each piece pointing to a network of disappearances that no one had connected before. Sophie couldn't help but glance at Rachel, then at herself, feeling the invisible thread of suspicion tightening. Later, as night fell, the dorm grew still. Sophie sat on her bed, staring at the half-empty room. She couldn't shake the feeling that eyes, real or imagined, were watching her from the shadows. Somewhere deep inside, a chill ran down her spine. Emma's clues were everywhere, but so was the threat. And Sophie knew, with a sinking certainty, that whatever had taken Emma was patient, careful, and still out there. The small interrogation room smelled faintly of coffee and bleach. A single fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead, casting sharp shadows across the walls. Sophie sat rigid in the metal chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across the table, Detective Reynolds studied her carefully, pen poised above his notebook. Officer Chen leaned against the wall, silent but watchful. "Thank you for coming in, Sophie," Reynolds began, his voice calm but firm. "We just need to ask a few questions." "Again?" Sophie swallowed hard. "I've already told campus security everything I know." Reynolds nodded. "I understand. But sometimes, in situations like this, details that seem small can make a big difference." Sophie's eyes flicked to the clock. Her heart pounded. "I don't know what else to say. Let's start with last night," Reynolds continued. "Emma was missing when you woke up. Can you walk me through everything you remember, step by step?" Sophie did so, recounting the evening as best she could, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain composed. Reynolds didn't interrupt. He only wrote, occasionally pausing to study her expressions, noting every micro-reaction. Then he leaned forward slightly. "Sophie, did Emma ever seem worried about someone? Anyone she mentioned in passing? Any conflicts you might have noticed?" Sophie hesitated. The memories of Emma's scattered notes and frantic scribbles returned to her mind. "No, not really. She seemed fine when I went to sleep." Reynolds scribbled again, then looked up sharply. "You don't seem convinced. Tell me, Sophie, was there anyone in the dorm or outside who might have made her uncomfortable?" Sophie shook her head. I don't know. She didn't say anything. I swear." Officer Chen stepped closer. "Sophie, sometimes fear makes people hold back information. Even the tiniest detail might help us find Emma. Did she leave any messages? Notes? Anything unusual in her room?" Sophie's gaze dropped to her hands. She wanted to scream that she had nothing to hide, that she didn't know anything beyond what Rachel had found. But the detective's eyes seemed to pierce straight through her, searching for the smallest crack. I didn't touch her stuff. I didn't. I wouldn't," her voice broke. Reynolds held up a hand. "I'm not accusing you yet. But your roommate is missing. We have to explore every angle. Do you understand?" Sophie nodded, biting her lip to keep from crying. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. Her own thoughts seemed to echo off the walls. Am I really a suspect? Reynolds closed his notebook slowly. "We'll be reviewing more footage, checking her contacts, and talking to her friends. For now, stay available. Don't leave town. Anne." "Sophie," he paused, letting the weight of his gaze settle on her. "Be honest with us. That's the only way Emma comes back safely." Sophie nodded again, though inside, panic churned. Every word felt like a trap, every question a test she didn't know how to pass. As she was escorted back to the dorm, whispers followed her down the hall. Eyes glanced toward her from every corner. The dorm, once familiar and safe, now felt like a cage. And deep inside, Sophie knew that surviving suspicion was only the beginning, something far darker was coming, and she had no idea if she was ready for it. Detective Reynolds sat in his office, the dim glow of a desk lamp illuminating stacks of files, photos, and scattered notes. The disappearance of Emma Collins was no longer an isolated incident. Something in her research, the emails, the blog posts, the frantic notes, was nagging at him. A pattern was emerging. Officer Chen leaned over his shoulder, scrolling through a nationwide database. "Detective, look at this." Emma had been tracking similar disappearances across the country. Mostly young women in college towns, always roommates involved somehow. Dates, locations, it lines up eerily well. Reynolds pinched the bridge of his nose, his mind racing. And the dorms, the last sightings, everything matches what we know about Emma's situation. Someone's following the same playbook. Chen pointed at a map dotted with red pins. "Here. Midwest, Southeast, West Coast, every disappearance has common threads, roommate connections, late-night departures, no clear motive. And in each case, initial suspicion falls on someone close to the victim." Reynolds rubbed his jaw. "Which means, this isn't random. Whoever's behind it is methodical, careful. They pick targets, plan meticulously, and make sure evidence points elsewhere. We've been looking at Sophie as a person of interest, but she's just the surface. Emma's research, it might have threatened them." Back at the dorm, Sophie and Rachel sat quietly in the common room. Sophie's mind was spinning. The weight of suspicion was unbearable, but now, hearing the detective mention a wider network of disappearances, fear twisted into a deeper confusion. I don't understand," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "Why would someone target Emma? She wasn't doing anything wrong." Rachel squeezed her hand. "She was investigating. She found patterns others hadn't. That's dangerous if the wrong person notices." Meanwhile, Reynolds reviewed Emma's emails again. One thread caught his attention. A user who signed only as observer. The messages were cryptic, discussing patterns, quiet roommates, and unseen eyes. Whoever observer was, they had known Emma had stumbled onto something significant. "Mark," Chen said quietly, "this isn't just a dorm incident. Emma might have uncovered part of a network we've never seen before. If we don't act fast," her voice trailed off. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. He thought of the other victims, the families, the unanswered questions. "We need to trace every lead Emma left behind. Her journals, emails, blog posts, every piece is a clue. This could be bigger than anything we've dealt with in years." As night fell over the city, the detective's office felt colder, darker. The pins on the map seemed to pulse with danger. And somewhere, far beyond New York, the person, or people, behind the disappearances were watching, waiting, aware that their pattern had been discovered. For Sophie, Rachel, and Detective Reynolds, the game had changed. What had started as a missing student in a New York dorm was now a thread pulling them into a sinister web stretching across the country. And the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. Emma's blog had always been a cheerful corner of the internet, posts about college life, favorite cafes, and weekend adventures. But now, Detective Reynolds stared at the screen, scrolling through her recent entries with a sense of unease. Something was hidden beneath the casual tone. "Look at this, Chen," Reynolds said, pointing to a post titled "Patterns in the Shadows." The words were subtle, almost playful, but the meaning was chilling. Sometimes the quiet ones notice things no one else does. And sometimes noticing is dangerous. Always pay attention to the small things, they matter more than you think. Chen frowned. She's leaving breadcrumbs. Whoever took her may have been aware she was onto something, but she's trying to document it anyway. Rachel, sitting beside them, leaned closer, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. These posts, they're recent, right? She's writing about strange events from the last few weeks. Look here. Mentions of someone watching, someone following, anonymous notes left in her mailbox. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. She documented fear without naming names. That's smart. Whoever's behind this is meticulous, they wouldn't leave a trace. But Emma's words might guide us. Sophie, listening silently, felt a chill crawl up her spine. The thought that someone had been observing Emma, right under their noses, was terrifying. "Do you think it could be someone in the dorm?" she asked, almost whispering. "Maybe," Reynolds admitted. But we have to consider a larger network too. The emails she sent and the posts she made could indicate a broader connection. Someone moving carefully from state to state, targeting victims and using anonymity to stay ahead. Rachel clicked on another post. This one contained a time-stamped photo of Emma leaving the library late at night, her expression tense. Scribbled beside it in the post were coordinates of a bus station in New York, a hotel in Chicago, a park in Ohio. Reynolds' heart skipped. She was tracking something, he said, almost to himself. These locations correspond with the other disappearances. She may have been following a lead, and it might have gotten her into danger. Chen added, her online activity could be the key to finding her. Whoever did this may not know how much she left behind. If we interpret it correctly, we could trace her steps and anticipate the next move. Sophie's hands trembled as she scrolled through more posts, reading the cryptic clues Emma had left for anyone determined enough to find them. Each one hinted at fear, each one a puzzle piece in a larger, more terrifying picture. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. We need to follow this trail precisely. Emma documented her fears, her observations, her investigations. If we decode it, we might be able to predict where she went, and maybe who's behind this. The city lights flickered outside the office window, casting shadows across the detectives' faces. The online trail Emma had left was more than a series of posts, it was a lifeline, a dangerous map that could either lead them to her, or into the path of a predator who was smarter, quieter, and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. For Sophie and Rachel, the blog was a haunting reminder. Emma had been aware of the threat. She had left hints, and now it was up to them to follow them, piece by piece, into the darkness. The dorm had changed. The once lively hallways, filled with laughter and chatter, were now filled with hushed whispers and sideways glances. Students avoided eye contact, their footsteps hesitant as if the walls themselves were watching. Sophie felt it with every step she took, an invisible weight of suspicion pressing down. "Did you hear?" a freshman whispered as Sophie passed by the common room. "Emma's roommate, she's the last person who saw her. People are saying she might know more than she's saying." Sophie froze, her stomach twisting. She wanted to protest, to shout that she knew nothing, that she was as worried as anyone else. But the words caught in her throat. Fear, doubt, and the cold edge of paranoia wrapped around her mind like a vice. Rachel tried to calm her. "Ignore them. People are scared, and when people are scared, they point fingers." Sophie nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, anxiety churned. Every knock on the door, every muffled laugh, every glance felt like accusation. She couldn't escape the feeling that eyes were everywhere, silently judging her. Meanwhile, Detective Reynolds and Officer Chen visited the dorm again, speaking to students and reviewing surveillance footage. Every interaction seemed to amplify the tension. Rumors spread faster than facts. Someone saw a figure in a hoodie near the dorm entrance. Someone else claimed they heard Emma arguing with an unknown visitor a week before. Reynolds noted the patterns carefully. "The dorm is a microcosm of what we're seeing nationally," he said to Chen. "Fear spreads, suspicion spreads, and predators thrive in that chaos." Back in the room, Sophie stared at the wall, tracing the edges of Emma's old posters. Rachel flipped through the journal again, pointing out notes that hinted at Emma's intuition about the danger surrounding her. She was trying to make sense of it, Rachel said softly. She saw patterns no one else did. A sudden knock at the door made Sophie jump. A fellow student, nervously clutching a backpack, peeked in. Sophie, can we talk? Just for a second?" Sophie hesitated but nodded. The student stepped inside, eyes darting to the floor. "People are talking. Some think you might be involved." Sophie's breath caught. "I didn't do anything," she whispered. The student nodded quickly. I know. I just thought you should be careful." After they left, Sophie sank onto the bed, trembling. The dorm, her home for the past year, had transformed into a cage of suspicion. Every face she passed seemed to hide judgment. Every glance felt like a silent accusation. Reynolds, reviewing reports and footage late that evening, sensed the psychological tension building. Students were scared, and that fear was starting to cloud judgment. The case was no longer just about finding Emma. It was about navigating a web of human suspicion, where perception could be more dangerous than reality. Sophie hugged herself, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere beyond the dorm walls, the truth waited. But inside, the silent judgment of those around her threatened to consume her. And in the shadows, she felt that whoever had taken Emma was still out there, patient, watching, waiting. The dorm room was quiet, too quiet. Sophie sat on her bed, staring at the wall, trying to block out the whispers and the stares from earlier. Rachel paced back and forth, her hands twisting the straps of her backpack. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Sophie, we need to talk," Rachel said finally, stopping in front of her. Her voice was steady but her eyes betrayed worry and frustration. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Sophie's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" she asked, though she already knew. Rachel shook her head. "I mean, people are scared. The police are asking questions. I keep thinking, what if you know something? Something you haven't told me?" Sophie's heart pounded. I've told you everything I know. I didn't touch her stuff, I didn't see anything." Rachel's hands fell to her sides. "Then why are you so quiet all the time? Why don't you share anything about yourself? Everyone's looking for answers. And I don't know if I can trust you." Tears stung Sophie's eyes. "Because I'm not her. I didn't take Emma. I loved her, okay? I cared about her." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, she shouted. "Do you think I would hurt her?" Rachel stepped back, conflicted. I don't know, Sophie. I don't know who to trust anymore." The room fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the air vent. Sophie's hands shook as she pressed them to her face. "You're my friend, you know I'd never hurt her." Rachel's expression softened slightly, but fear lingered in her eyes. "I want to believe you. I really do. But everything is spinning out of control. Emma's gone, and we're grasping at shadows." Sophie's voice was barely a whisper now. "Then help me find her. Don't let suspicion tear us apart." Rachel nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "You're right. We need to stick together. But Sophie, promise me you'll be honest with me. No secrets." "I promise," Sophie said, her voice firm despite the trembling inside. Later, as the dorm quieted for the night, the two sat together on the bed, a fragile alliance forming between them. Outside, the city lights flickered, casting shadows across the room. Somewhere beyond the walls, the invisible threat lingered, patient and calculating. Sophie knew that the confrontation had been inevitable. The tension, the whispers, the fear, it was all part of a larger game she didn't fully understand. But one thing was clear, if they were going to find Emma, they had to face the fear, suspicion, and doubt together. And somewhere in the darkness, the person, or people, responsible for Emma's disappearance were already one step ahead, watching the fragile alliance form, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Detective Reynolds leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The case had grown more complex by the hour. Emma's disappearance wasn't just an isolated incident, it was part of a disturbing pattern spanning multiple states. The online trail she had left was a labyrinth of clues, and every lead seemed to open into a darker maze. Chen tapped her tablet. "Mark, look at this." I cross-referenced the blog coordinates with the nationwide disappearances. There's a match in Chicago, exactly 1 week before Emma vanished. And the victim there, she had a quiet roommate too. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. So the pattern is consistent. Quiet roommates, college towns, late-night departures. The same observer that Emma mentioned online could be orchestrating this. Meanwhile, back in the dorm, Sophie and Rachel were poring over Emma's journal again. Sophie noticed something new, a small symbol drawn in the margins of several pages, a circle intersected by 3 lines. "Rachel, look at this." She drew this over and over, especially near certain notes about locations. Rachel leaned closer. "It looks like a map key, maybe a signal. If we trace it with the coordinates she left on her blog, we might find the last place she went before disappearing." Reynolds had just received a call from the lab. Mark, fingerprints on Emma's dorm door weren't hers, the technician reported. There's an unknown set, could be our observer. The detective's mind raced. That's it. Someone has been inside the room. Someone Emma might have known or trusted, maybe even Sophie unknowingly shared the space with the wrong person. Back at the dorm, Sophie's phone buzzed. A notification from Emma's social media account, a scheduled post, set to go live after her disappearance. It contained coordinates and a cryptic note: the truth is hidden where the quiet ones meet the shadows. Follow the pattern. Sophie's hands shook as she showed Rachel. She left this for us. To find her. Rachel swallowed hard. We have to tell the detectives. This could be the lead they need to locate her, and maybe stop the next disappearance. Reynolds and Chen arrived quickly, scanning the coordinates and symbols. This could be it, Reynolds said, his voice tight with anticipation. Emma knew something. She tried to leave a trail. If we decode this correctly, we might reach her, before it's too late. As night fell over the city, the detectives prepared to trace Emma's final known path. The breakthrough was a fragile thread of hope, hanging in the darkness. Sophie felt a spark of determination ignite within her. For the first time since Emma disappeared, she believed they could uncover the truth. But deep down, a cold, lurking fear remained. Whoever had taken Emma had planned carefully, anticipated every move. The race against time was on, and one misstep could mean the difference between life and death. The dorm felt colder than ever. Even the familiar hum of the ventilation system seemed sinister, each breath of air carrying an unseen tension. Sophie paced her room, trying to focus, but the whispers and sideways glances of other students made her skin crawl. She knew now that danger was closer than anyone had realized. Rachel sat on the bed, scrolling through Emma's notes again. Sophie, look at this. In her emails, there's a thread she kept hidden. Someone, probably our observer, was communicating with her subtly, leaving hints that only Emma would notice. Sophie's hands shook. Are you saying, someone in the dorm? Rachel hesitated. I don't want to believe it, but yes. Someone here knew exactly what Emma was doing. Someone who blended in. At that moment, Detective Reynolds knocked and entered, a solemn expression on his face. We've reviewed the dorm surveillance and the access logs. Someone entered Emma's room on multiple occasions. Fingerprints and keycard entries don't match anyone officially authorized. Sophie's heart thudded. Do you know who it is? Reynolds shook his head. Not yet. But Emma's final clues, the blog, the symbols, the notes, they point towards someone in her immediate circle. Someone patient, calculating, and extremely cautious. Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. Sophie, it could be someone you've trusted. Someone close. Sophie's eyes widened. A cold wave of dread washed over her. Could it be someone I know? Someone I see every day? Reynolds leaned forward, placing the symbols from Emma's journal on the table. We've traced these coordinates and patterns. Whoever took Emma has been planning for months, possibly years. But Emma left breadcrumbs, deliberate, careful, hidden. We have to interpret them correctly to locate her and prevent another disappearance. Sophie swallowed hard. I'll help. I'll do whatever it takes to find her. Good, Reynolds said. But remember, this person knows how to manipulate perception. They thrive on fear and confusion. You can't trust appearances, not even in this room. Rachel clutched Sophie's hand. We stick together. We follow the trail. We find Emma. As night deepened, the dorm grew eerily quiet. Shadows stretched across the walls, hiding eyes that might be watching, analyzing, waiting. Sophie felt the invisible threat pressing closer. Whoever the hidden enemy was, they were patient and meticulous. And in the darkness, somewhere nearby, the predator who had taken Emma smiled faintly, confident that the next move in this deadly game would still be theirs to control, unless Sophie, Rachel, and Detective Reynolds could decipher Emma's final, hidden clues in time. The stakes had never been higher, and the clock was ticking. The city lights blurred past the car window as Detective Reynolds drove, Chen navigating with her tablet, and Sophie clutched Emma's journal in her lap. Each turn and traffic signal felt like a heartbeat, counting down to an unknown moment. "We've decoded the blog coordinates," Reynolds said, voice tight. "They lead to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Emma's last post hinted this could be where she was taken, or where she tried to hide evidence." Sophie's stomach churned. "Do you think she's still alive?" Reynolds didn't answer immediately. "We have to assume she is. That assumption keeps us moving, keeps us focused. Any hesitation could cost her life." The streets grew darker, less populated. Chen highlighted points on the map, showing entrances, exits, and possible surveillance blind spots. "If the suspect notices us first, Emma's chances drop exponentially. This isn't just about catching them, it's about timing and precision." Sophie turned the journal's pages, scanning Emma's notes. Symbols, coded messages, cryptic sketches, they all pointed to a methodical path Emma had left behind. "She's trying to guide us," Sophie whispered. "She knew we'd come." The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the night sky. Reynolds killed the engine, and they approached on foot, weapons ready. Every sound, distant traffic, a falling piece of debris, made their hearts race. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Footprints led deeper into the building, and faint light flickered from a corner. Sophie's hands shook as she recognized the patterns Emma had drawn in her journal. They matched the cracks in the concrete floor and the beams above. "There," Chen whispered, pointing. A locked cage in the far corner revealed a faint movement, Emma, pale but conscious, clutching her arms. Relief and urgency collided in Sophie's chest. Before they could react further, a shadow moved along the rafters. The predator stepped into the dim light, calm, calculated. "You're early," they said, voice eerily casual. "I was hoping for a longer game." Reynolds raised his weapon. "Drop the knife. Step away from her." The suspect smiled faintly. "Oh, detective, you don't understand. Patterns, they're everywhere. And now you're part of one." A tense standoff followed, every second stretching like an eternity. Sophie's heart pounded as she edged closer to Emma. The predator's eyes flicked between them, calculating escape routes, considering their moves. Then, a sudden noise from behind startled the assailant. Chen had moved silently, catching them off guard. Reynolds lunged, and a struggle erupted. Sophie's adrenaline surged, she grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her toward the exit. Minutes later, outside in the night air, Sophie held Emma close, tears streaming. Reynolds and Chen restrained the suspect, finally bringing an end to months of terror, fear, and unanswered questions. Sophie whispered, her voice trembling, "It's over, you're safe now." Emma, still shaking, nodded, holding on to her friend. "Thank you, for not giving up." Reynolds watched them, the tension slowly ebbing from his shoulders. "It's over, for now. But always remember, patterns like this don't appear by accident. Vigilance is everything." As the city lights twinkled, Sophie realized that the shadows were never completely gone. But together, they had faced them, traced the clues, and found Emma. And for the first time in weeks, hope outweighed fear. Morning sunlight spilled across the dorm hallway, washing away the shadows of the night. For the first time in weeks, the halls felt ordinary again. Students returned to their routines, though whispers of Emma's disappearance lingered faintly in the air. Sophie and Rachel walked side by side, each step lighter than before. Emma walked between them, her arms around their shoulders, smiling shakily but genuinely. The nightmare had ended, and yet, a quiet vigilance remained. Detective Reynolds watched from the edge of the dorm courtyard. The case was closed, the predator in custody, and the chain of disappearances linked back to a single calculated individual. But he knew patterns could re-emerge, and threats could hide behind the most ordinary facades. For now, though, justice had prevailed. Sophie looked down at Emma's journal, the pages worn and filled with cryptic notes, sketches, and coded coordinates. "She left so many clues," Sophie whispered. "I just wish we'd figured them out sooner." Emma smiled faintly. "I tried my best. And you didn't give up. That mattered more than anything." Rachel nodded. "You're both lucky. And strong. You stuck together even when everyone else doubted you." Later, at a small cafe near campus, the three friends sat quietly, sipping coffee. The city hummed around them, unaware of the terror that had lurked in its shadows. Sophie glanced at Emma, her heart swelling with relief and gratitude. "You know," Sophie said softly, "I'll never take ordinary days for granted again." Emma laughed lightly, the sound fragile but real. "Neither will I. And I promise, no more hidden trails for anyone to follow." Reynolds returned to his office later that evening, reviewing the final report. Every piece of evidence, every clue Emma had left, and every action taken had culminated in this resolution. He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, reflecting on the case. It had tested courage, trust, and intellect, revealing both the darkness lurking in the world and the resilience of those willing to face it. Sophie, sitting in her room that night, placed Emma's journal carefully on the shelf. The dorm was quiet, peaceful again, but memories of the ordeal lingered. She knew life would continue, friendships would strengthen, and the lessons learned would never fade. Somewhere in the city, a shadow still moved unnoticed. But for now, Sophie, Emma, and Rachel had reclaimed their lives. Patterns had been broken, silence shattered, and trust restored. The terror had passed, but the bond between them, forged in fear and uncertainty, would remain unbreakable. As the lights dimmed and the city settled into night, Sophie whispered a silent promise, to protect those she loved, to remain vigilant, and to never forget the lessons hidden in the shadows. The silent roommate was no longer just a mystery. It was a testament to courage, friendship, and the relentless pursuit of truth.